You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the final episode, Sob, of Lower Decks called The New Next Generation. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Father Jason Tyler. Hey, Father.
Hello.
And Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, we have more of your great listener feedback coming at the end of the episode, so stick around for that. Be sure to follow The Secrets of Star Trek in Apple Podcasts and Spotify, TuneIn, your favorite podcast app, or watch us on our YouTube channel, where, of course, you should make sure to hit the bell to get notifications. You can also watch us on Spotify. We always upload the video of our discussion there as well once the episode goes live. There's a slightly delay because of the way it works. So, but you can watch us there as well. And we get lots of great listeners and viewers on Spotify. So I'm glad to have us there. And I want to tell you about another show on the Star Quest Network I'm sure you'll enjoy, called The Secrets of Middle Earth, which you can find wherever fine podcasts are found, or at sqpn.com/Middle Earth. So, Jimmy, can you give us the final recap of Lower Decks episode, Next New Generation?
This week, our Lower Deckers get the message from William Boimler, letting them know about the universe-destroying wave unleashed by Lieutenant Harry Kim. Brad Boimler freaks out, but then he and Mariner promptly report the situation to Starfleet, which comes up with a way to seal the rift. But they have to get to it first, and it's surrounded by a field of probability and reality-altering weirdness. Starfleet has a fix that will protect the crew, but the ship itself will go through unpredictable changes. Their journey to the center of the rift is complicated by a Klingon captain named Relga. She's the sister of the two brothers that our old friend Ma'a killed. And now Relga wants to kill Ma'a and his brother Malor, who have been given temporary asylum aboard the Cerritos. Relga and her fleet of Klingon ships follow the Cerritos into the reality-altering field, protected by the same shield modifications that are protecting the Cerritos. So both ships are unpredictably transforming into other ships while their crews remain the same. Eventually, Relga has the Cerritos at her mercy, but Zeus's granddaughter Ali is able to knock out their shields. This causes their crew to become mindless proto-Klingons that start fighting among themselves, and afterwards their ship explodes. Captain Freeman is now free to deal with the universe-destroying rift, but the strange forces split the Cerritos into two entangled quantum possibilities, with the crew of each Cerritos controlling what the other Cerritos does. The two ships then work together and manage to stabilize the rift, turning it into a permanent portal between different quantum realities. The series then does a Deep Space Nine. Only Starbase 80 is old enough to be near the rift without being affected, so it's assigned permanent monitor duty by the interdimensional wormhole. Captain Freeman is reassigned to Starbase 80 to oversee the traffic through the wormhole, and Ransom is promoted to captain of the Cerritos. Rutherford has also learned in the emergency that his real problem was with his ocular implant, and it turns out he doesn't need it, so he's adjusting to life without it, and Ransom appoints Boimler and Mariner as temporary Akin co-first officers. The end.
That's a lot. Father, what's your overall impression of this episode?
I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good finale. I had really, really high expectations. And so in a couple of ways, this episode didn't quite live up to everything I was hoping, especially with the penultimate being, I thought, such a great setup. I thought we were going to get a little bit more follow-up from Nat, the crew of the NX Commander and such there. But nonetheless, even with those letdowns, I still found this to be a good finale.
Excellent. And Jimmy?
Well, I thought it was fun, but I didn't think it lived up to where it needed to be. This is a common problem in science fiction finales. They're often anticlimactic. Their series frequently tend to be really good at buildup and not so great at payoff. And so when we're looking at the end of a series, I'm generally not hoping for best episode ever, because that's unlikely to be the case. I'm looking for tolerable episode as an ending. And this was a tolerable episode as an ending, but I didn't think it was great. Yeah. The problem is they shot their wad with the previous episode. That was where they gave us the big reveals and the big developments and the big creative ideas. And the penultimate episode was the high watermark of this story arc, and a lot of this episode feels tacked on. All they've really got to do is go to the middle of this thing and do something science-y, and they create barriers to that happening. They specifically create two barriers. The first is the reality warp and weirdness that's around the central rift. And the second is the whole subplot with Relga. And they've seeded that subplot previously in that we've at least been introduced to Ma'a and his brother Malor, and we know he has this conflict with this other Klingon family, but then Relga comes out of nowhere in this episode, and and they just happen to show up at the same time as this universe destroying thing, and we can't let that take priority. So, which would be the rational thing for Relga to do, let him seal the rift to save the universe, and then she can kill him, so it feels coincidental and tacked on. It's okay. It's not terrible. It's just not a logical, natural climax for what they've done with the story arc thus far. They let it climax too early.
Right. The problem with a series finale is it's got to wrap up whatever storyline you've been running through, and especially if you have a season-long story arc, and then wrap up the series. And it's especially in a half hour, it's nearly impossible to do both of those to the level that this amazing series deserves. So yeah, it was almost a foregone conclusion that it would never be as satisfying as you could possibly want it to be. And some threads got left hanging, I think. And I'll have some notes on that as we go through. But in general, yeah, I mean, another enjoyable episode of Lower Decks. The characteristic Easter eggs. There were some things in the Easter eggs, or the little reality distorting bits that I was hoping we're going to explore more, but we didn't. And where we leave it, if they decide to make this wormhole and this multiverse canon, which I think a lot of things in Lower Decks,
all this is canon.
Yeah, although I mean, you have some of the most bizarre things that happens in Lower Decks. It's like they're not going to
follow up on.
Yeah. But I'm hoping that the wormhole is, because that could, or the reality wormhole could create some interesting possibilities to explain certain things and why things are different, in Strange New Worlds versus TOS and all that sort of stuff. So we can get into that as we go. But one of the first things that we see in the reality distortion is a Klingon bird of prey being turned into, and its crew being turned into those Discovery era, first season Discovery Klingons, which I thought was, oh my gosh, we're about to explain why they're different. But they didn't follow that up. I was a little disappointed we didn't get a follow up.
No, it was nice they did that, though. I was very excited when one of the Klingons that looks the way Klingons should look, gets warped into one of the bizarre, stupid Discovery Klingons.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So go ahead.
But, it's kind of like the difference between the way Klingons looked in the original series versus in the Next Generation. Deep Space Nine first acknowledged that in Trials and Tribulations, but they didn't do anything to explain it. They just sort of acknowledged this is a thing. And then it's later in an episode of Enterprise that they try to give an explanation for that. So maybe this is the acknowledgement of the Discovery Klingons looking different, and somewhere further down the line, we'll get an explanation.
Right. Yeah. The fact that it's just an alternate reality or something along those lines.
Yeah. I'm not saying it'll be a good explanation, but there might be an explanation.
It's going to have to come out of Discovery. So, or maybe Strange New Worlds. So,
right. Yeah.
That's true.
One thing that I like to do when looking at a season finale like this, where they really got to plan it out, is thinking about how it compares to other sci-fi finales. So, Babylon 5 was always understood as a 5-year arc, and it got to pay off its arc in ways that were analogous to what was initially planned, but they had changes along the way. I thought the final season of Babylon 5, which they had because of the show's unique history, they had truncated and then they had to refill the fifth season with new stories. Mm-hmm. And so I thought the season as a whole was weak, but the ending was good. The ending had been pre-planned and was very good. With Battlestar Galactica, I thought it was kind of a middling, solution. I didn't mind the humans. Spoilers for a 20-year-old series, folks. I didn't mind the humans and the Cylons becoming allies at the end. I liked that. Or at least the humans and the good Cylons becoming allies at the end. I didn't mind this being an Adam and Eve story, where they go back in time and seed our Earth. That was fine with me. My criticisms there were, I didn't mind, Starbuck turning out to be an angel or anything like that. I thought all that was fine. My only real criticism is this stupid moment in Battlestar Galactica where Leodama decides, oh, hey, technology has caused our problems, so let's deliberately abandon our technology and start over and live like, people who have survival skills that our decadent Capricorn culture in no way has. That was a stupid moment. Yeah. They could have even kept the moment, though, and had Leodama give his speech about maybe without technology, it'll be better this time if we deliberately abandon it, and just have Captain Adama at that moment go, son, we don't have any manufacturing base. We're not going to keep this technology no matter what we want to do. Right. And we can't leave those ships in orbit because of hazard reasons. So we're just going to, we are going to revert to the Stone Age. We have no choice. Right. They could have kept the moment and fixed that. And just with a few little fixes, it would have been much better. But so I thought that was a middling one. And that's kind of where I put this. One that I think is really good is the end of 12 Monkeys. 12 Monkeys was a time travel story that was like 5 years that was plotted all in advance. And unlike Babylon 5, they didn't have a lot of cast shakeups and unpredictable stuff happening. So they got to really pay off everything they intended. And that one I thought was a superior series finale. This I thought was middling. They did seed a lot of stuff that paid off in the conclusion where it was not obvious they were seeding stuff. The Klingon subplot was not an obvious seed for the finale. Zeus's granddaughter, Ali, was not an obvious seed for the finale, but they used those and they paid them off. And I thought it was good. I just thought it structurally felt tacked on. And so I thought it was middling. I put this in the Battlestar Galactica range. It was fine. It was just middling.
And there were so many little nuggets of things that I kept thinking, oh, this is going to make it a great finale. Like the I mentioned the Discovery Klingon thing. That would have been kind of fun. They mentioned the Enterprise. The Enterprise is on the way to, help to do this, but the Cerritos is closer. I'm like, ooh, maybe the Enterprise will show up and we'll get a little bit of, I don't know, Patrick Stewart or Will Riker or something, a little bit of that kind of cameo. That would have been fun. Although I know that would sort of overshadow the main crew of Lower Decks at the end. So maybe not so much, but I just kept seeing these little bits in there and thinking, oh, that'll be fun, and not really getting those. And the criticism is not to say this wasn't a good episode. I think we're agreed on that. It's just, oh, how much, it could have been, or what we were expecting, and maybe our expectations are just too high, or something. I don't know, but
no, I think our reaction is a fallout of the choices made by the writers.
Yeah,
the writers didn't want to do a supervillain reveal; they wanted to do something different, and I commend them for that. And they then chose to do their non-supervillain reveal in the penultimate episode instead of the ultimate. And that means that they had to come up with added drama for the final episode. And it just felt tacked. And they did. It was just tacked on drama. There was no way for the drama to follow organically from the story arc they had set up, because they'd already done the principal resolution on that.
Right. And there was no villain to, so we had to tack on a villain who just shows up at the last minute. Right. we have character moments. We mentioned those in the recap. We're kind of showing how our characters have evolved over the course of the series. So Mariner is learning to relax, and she's a lot more chill about everything. Rutherford is kind of cranky. He's kind of cranky about the Cerritos. In fact, we get this sort of subplot going through it about how he's fallen out of love with the Cerritos and then learns to love her all over again in a new way, or rediscovers it, especially once he realizes it's not the Cerritos that's upsetting him, but the implant. And so he's got a kind of a bit of a rebirth going on in this episode.
Yeah, and that's all fine, but then they don't set up his, I don't need this ocular implant after all. And they don't really pay off his implant, which was what gave him his new personality after his secret Texas class testing program.
Right.
So they don't really follow up on that. And it just kind of comes out of nowhere when he rips the ocular implant off of his head and then doesn't need it anymore.
Right. Like, why was he, like, he needed it before, but so suddenly he didn't need it. And we didn't explain why he didn't need it, which was kind of weird. We did get T'Lyn coming right out and talking about the romantic tension between Tendi and Rutherford, who both immediately deny it, which is I'm fine with them leaving them in that sort of, we're friends, but everyone knows
they mode.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I don't think you have to pay that off, and every single thing like that off.
Sort of a Schrodinger's romance, if you will.
Yeah.
Well, we had Schrodinger's reality distortion field, so may as well have Schrodinger's romance. That's true.
No, that's a good term for will they, won't they in a science fiction context. Yeah. That should become a standard.
Yes, we'll have to keep using that. What was it? Oh, Boimler, who became a pretty darn good helmsman in this one. He was flying the Cerritos through these distortion fields with some ability. And so we've really seen this crew grow. And in fact, they kind of pointed out at the end how, I think it's Mariner who's kind of recounting, we're doing that standard montage that you often have of this is who we've become sort of thing. And kind of pointing out that the crew of the Cerritos, we may be weird. We may be, our solutions may be a little offbeat and strange, but we get the job done. And I think that's kind of the Lower Decks motto, that we may be weird, but we get the job done. And that's nice. I like that, actually.
So one thing that they did, there's a lot of little things in this that are nice. I like that Relga has this Klingon lapdog. Yeah. Instead of a Targ, it's like this little vicious looking chihuahua that actually doesn't look any weirder than some real world chihuahuas. Some of them are really weird and ugly looking.
Yes.
So it's nice to see a Klingon lapdog. I liked early on when they get the message from William Boimler, the crew immediately starts thinking of the Boimlers as who have put them in this situation. And Brad is like, it was William. It wasn't me. It was William. And he immediately afterwards, Captain Freeman just picks it up again with, looks like the Boimlers have given us no choice. And so I thought that was nice on a writing level. They then come up with this idea that as they move through the weirdness field, because of the fix that Starfleet gave them, which was meant to be a complete fix, but it's not going to cover everything with their hull, they decide it won't affect the crew, but it will affect the ship, which is dumb, but I can go with it.
Sure.
So the ships are changing, and then they have the Klingon ship, which is using the same protocols. So it's having the same effects happen. It turns into ancient Klingon sailing barge, and that's an interesting transformation. It's not even a starship; it's a sea ship.
Yes,
rowing power. And then we see, but it's not pressurized against space, and so we see all these bodies fly off, and it's a dramatic moment in this chase. And they say all lives lost, and so I'm thinking, oh well, that solves that problem. If all lives are lost because of this weird transformation, then they're not going to have this Klingon ship hunting them anymore. But then they do. Well,
there were multiple Klingon ships.
Well, Yeah, they could, because you've got Relga's ship and then she's got 3 little drone ships.
Yeah.
And so it's so jumbled though that I think they could have been clearer about what they were doing. They also had Brad Boimler at one point, and I forget the proximate motive for this, but he needs to sacrifice the alternate universe pad that he's been basing his life transformation on. And he does. He sacrifices the pad and is going to go it his own way now, which is a nice, moment. There's also a good moment where he and Mariner are doing a friendship high five, only they use the Vulcan symbol for hand signal for high fives as they're high fiving each other. And I thought that was nice. And then they also, during all the transformations, once the Klingon shield modifications are knocked offline and they start turning into proto-Klingons and fighting each other, there's no real reason, at least if there is, it goes by too fast, for their ship to explode after that.
They said something, but
they may have said something, but it's like, okay, they're all proto-Klingons now, but that doesn't automatically lead to an explosion.
Yeah.
But I like the little Klingon lapdog turns into a Klingon clam. And it's just a clam. It's not like a weird clam. It's just, okay, Klingon clams are like human clams. Or Terran clams.
Yep.
So that was nice. And then they had Starbase 80 gets repurposed as the Deep Space Nine of the new interdimensional wormhole, which was nice having, because you kind of have a parallel there where Deep Space Nine was originally this rundown, terrible Bajoran or Cardassian facility that had come under the power of the Bajorans and was now repurposed. And so you now have the worst starbase in Starfleet getting to perform a new higher purpose, and you get Captain Freeman in charge of it, which also happened in the alternate reality. Only here, that's not a tragedy.
Right.
So
and Admiral Freeman gets to show up too. Yeah.
So I liked how they did that. All that was nice.
So the Klingon dog, it just occurred to me, was it the same? It was like that horned Pomeranian that Sulu had in TOS. Remember that one?
Yeah, but that wasn't a Klingon dog.
No, but it kind of reminded me of it. I don't know if it was intentional or not. So, but maybe not. As a ship geek, I did have to keep track of all the transformations of the Cerritos, and so they had the one nacelle Freedom class, which is another one of those deep cuts because there's been these debates among fans who like the Star Trek ships. Can you have a one nacelle starship? Because the theory is that the two nacelles create a warp bubble, and how can you have it with one? And they actually kind of talk about that in the midst of this situation. So that was kind of fun. But you also get a Terran Empire design. So they get the Terran Empire version of the Cerritos. Then it becomes a Oberth class, which is the one that was destroyed in Wrath of Khan, the science vessel in Wrath of Khan. Not the but then there's also the Reliant, which was the one that Chekhov was on, the one that Khan took control of. And then there's the became a Galaxy class, like the Enterprise, and then finally the Sovereign class, which is the big movie Enterprise. So that was a lot of fun to see the Cerritos kind of go through all those changes and become all of these classic ships from throughout the series, the various series and movies. So that was fun. I did like that. Ollie gets to use her powers. I thought that was pretty fun. That they became key to disabling Relga's ship. And when Relga and her crew turned into proto-Klingons, that's the same design Worf turned into in TNG. The Genesis was the episode. They're basically
another one of those Klingon cavemen. Yeah,
one of those storylines that we actually had in this season of the people devolving into their earlier forms. We talked about that recently. Let's see what else is there. Rutherford, once he realizes that the problem is not the Cerritos, but his implant comes up with this amazing fix in engineering to run the ship on power from the spatial fissure, the split, and amazes everyone. So that was kind of fun. And then we even get that moral lesson when the ship's split into two. Today's chaos has driven us apart and we have to be united. And then we get this like Wonder Twins moment between T'Lyn and Tendi of, science besties. And they kind of high five or do the, like you mentioned. So that was fun.
I like the entanglement they establish where each of the Cerritos split is in control of what the other Cerritos ship does. I thought that was a creative use of quantum entanglement here.
It was.
I also like after Rutherford has done his engineer and technobabble magic, after all the dust is settled in the new crew situation, Ransom, who's now captain, turns to Rutherford and says, "A little birdie told me that you made some pretty inspired updates to the plasma injectors." And without missing a beat, Rutherford says, "Was it Dr. Miglimo?" And Ransom says, "Yes, it was." And that's a great repurposing of "A little birdie told me."
Yeah.
That's one of the lower decks has excelled at that sort of thing, is turning phrases on their head in a unique way. I did like that.
One thing I wasn't sure I was going to be okay with was having Boimler and Mariner appointed co-first officers, because I was actually spoiled on that. And so I knew they were heading toward, and after the disappointing ending of Prodigy, where out of nowhere Gwen becomes the acting captain or whatever instead of Dal, I was sensitive to like, oh, this co-first officers, this, they just done co-science officers. And I wasn't sure. My initial reaction to that was negative, but then when I saw it in context, okay, A, they take the edge off of it. It's temporary. And B, B, it's just Ransom being a jerk. And so it's like, okay, they've established Ransom can be a jerk before as a healthy competition among people under him, and he can think he's doing something clever when it's really going to not be that great. And so I could accept it in this context. It's not like a policy. This is just Ransom's stupid idea.
And it's uniquely lower decks. Sure, why not? Because it's crazy, and let's do it on lower decks. I like the fact that the solution of stopping the rift that makes it permanent actually comes from Malor, the blood wine farmer. In fact, it sort of turns on the head, like the Malor, who's sort of the Klingon who wants to avoid fighting, and is he's the one who comes up with this solution. It comes out of left field, and I do like that. That was unexpected. I mentioned Mariner's speech about why the Cerritos kicks butt. That was good. I think other things that came up. Any other thoughts on this episode, Father?
Yeah, a couple of little things they give voice to that are kind of common in Star Trek. This we're the only ship that can be there, the only ship that can. Captain Freeman calls that out. I forget what she said exactly. Somehow we're the only ship available. Even when they said at one point it was about the Boimlers being linked. My thought was, well, okay, if Brad Boimler is so important to this, put him on the most powerful ship that can get through things and make that work. But anyway, we have the frequent thing of the main ship being the only ship available, and that gets called out here. And then even once when the Klingon ships are not changing that much, and there's a comment made about that, and it says, well, Klingon ships don't change that often. And it's like, well, that's true. We've had the same bird of prey design since forever, and the Federation ships change frequently.
That's true. Yeah,
that was a nice exploitation of previous write-in and prop choices.
Yes, exactly.
The Klingon cruisers pretty much the same since TOS. Mostly. That's true. How about you, Jimmy? Other thoughts on this episode?
Well, they give us what Ransom's engage catchphrase is going to be engage the core, which I would appreciate more if I knew more about weightlifting, but I gather that's a weightlifting reference.
The core is your central muscle.
Oh yeah.
Right.
No. I get that. Yeah. It's just, I'm guessing that this engage the core actually turns up in weightlifting discussions on the regular. And I'm just not familiar with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. You got to work your core. Okay. So that's the new Next Generation, which what am I trying to say? Picard season 3, the final episode was the new, wasn't the new Next Generation, but it was something similar, wasn't it?
Generation?
The Next Generation. Yeah. Yeah. So, they're kind of playing off of the fact that, Picard and Star Trek Picard ended with the Next Generation, and now, or the new, I forget what it was.
The last.
Father Tyler is correct, Dom. It is the last generation.
Oh, sorry. I didn't hear the word last. Okay.
No, he's only said it like 3 times. So.
Sorry. I'm only deaf as often as I can be. Mm-hmm. So I feel like they're kind of playing off that final episode. So that would be fun. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now that we've talked about this episode, let's talk about the series as a whole and our overall impressions of its 5 seasons. I mean, I think we've all spoken about how much we enjoy the series, but what's your assessment in general? Father, I'll let you go first again, since you've only had you with us for this one season.
Right. I really enjoyed Lower Decks, and I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. When it was first announced, I liked in some ways the premise because I enjoyed the TNG episode Lower Decks, and I thought, okay, it's going to give us a different look at what's happening on these ships. But when I heard it would be animated and different things, I was a little bit, that lowered my expectations a bit, I guess. But getting into it, seeing how much it was not only a farce, but also all the Easter eggs, all the ways of calling back to things that that fans maybe have been talking about in different ways along the way. You consider that on the one hand with Prodigy, which was designed to be a kid's show that would maybe invite people into the Star Trek universe, but still was able to weave in some old things and Easter eggs and whatnot. This, on the other hand, is Lower Decks is a series designed for long-term Trekkies to pay off certain things we've seen before and to see, to make fun of really different things in other Star Trek series.
Yep. In a beloved way.
In a beloved way. Yes.
Yes. How about you, Jimmy, your overall impression?
Oh, I think the series was great. And I anticipated it was going to be, or had the potential to be great from just when it was first announced as a series before it was even on the air. I remember that Dom, you and then Father Corey were quite skeptical and weren't even sure if you wanted to cover this.
As you often point out.
Yeah, because I was right. And I could see the potential, the fact that I could see how a comedy could work with Star Trek and be animated and still be, respectful. And so I realized, of course, there was potential for it to be done wrong, the same way Discovery was done wrong. But I realized this could work. And so, I was looking forward to seeing what they did with it. And they did it good. Early on, it was clear that the people who are making this really love Star Trek. And even though they're poking fun at it, they really love it. Right. One of the moments early on that really illustrated that for me is one where in an early episode, Brad Boimler is having a crisis of confidence and he thinks he doesn't belong in Starfleet anymore. And he's talking to Mariner and he's saying like, I shouldn't be in Starfleet anymore. I don't deserve this. I should just retire to a science asteroid and then I'll eventually be killed by a monster and they'll have to figure out what happened by examining my final shaky logs. And Mariner is like, no, don't you even say that. And it's like, okay, these people understand Star Trek. They love Star Trek. They understand how this works. This is good.
Yeah. You're coming into it.
And I would have loved to have 5 more seasons of this.
Oh yeah.
I don't think they played this out at all. They could have kept going. I wish they had kept going.
Yeah. Coming into the series, I was thinking it's animation aimed at adults, and I was afraid it could go two directions. It could go Family Guy in space, or it could go Simpsons in space. Family Guy in space would be too raunchy, sure, there are funny jokes, but it always goes too far. Whereas Simpsons is funny. It's long lasting, but
no substance.
But right. Mm-hmm. They threaded the line, and they brought us something that was fun without going too far. Although at times, some episodes, and I think the bleeped profanity in this last season, I didn't do a count, but it felt like it was even more than before. It was all right. I mean, at least they bleeped it. They didn't have to do that. The sexual stuff, especially in certain episodes, kind of wish they hadn't gone there. But there's only really 2 episodes that really went over the line with that sort of thing. But the rest was so good. Even to the point of they pulled off a live action crossover with Strange New Worlds. Mm-hmm. I mean, that right there is a huge accomplishment that they were able to cross over into the more serious. I mean, Strange New Worlds doesn't take itself too seriously, but it's not farce like this is. And they managed it. They carried it. They pulled it off, and it was great. I actually have to be honest. I was kind of wondering if they would do it again in this one, of some sort of bringing characters across from Strange New Worlds into this, back from live action, but they didn't, which is fine, I guess. But overall, I can't think of any stories that completely fell flat. Any episodes that were just terrible. It always worked out, and it was a show clearly made by fans who, that thing we all always want to do with something you really love, at least when you're a certain kind of person, you poke fun at it because you love it. You find the lovable flaws, and you love it almost because of those flaws, whether it's TOS and the cheesy sets and the planets with the same rocks just moved around, all the time.
Oh, I was
just a big hand.
Yeah. Or speaking of the rocks just moved around, I was just thinking about that because we at St. Joseph's in Fayetteville, Arkansas, for the Immaculate Conception, they had this display up in the altar area of Our Lady of Guadalupe that had all of these paper mache rocks, and it was just like on Star Trek. And I took pictures of it. I'm going to put them on Facebook. It's like, wow.
I've said before, when I was in high school, for my friends and I, the local cable access station, they had to have make stuff available for the community to use, equipment and stuff if you get trained on it. We made a Star Trek parody, and one of the bits of the Star Trek parody that we did was like we had, Kirk and Spock and McCoy walking through, and they walk past this huge boulder, and like Kirk stops and goes, "Didn't we see that rock last week?" Just like
I saw an interview with Sylvester McCoy, who played the 7th Doctor who talked about how as a kid he would watch Star Trek and he would notice this one rock that would show up from episode to episode.
Yeah, and pointing out, I mean, Lower Decks is kind of that they got the ability to make that sort of parody Star Trek that a lot of us had, imagined making as kids. They got to play in Star Trek world and make that, and that's pretty darn good, and I'm glad they did. And I'm sad it's leaving. If we look at the state of Star Trek as it is today, we've got Strange New Worlds. Thank God, that's it's fantastic, and it's continuing. We have this Section 31 movie, but it's a one-off. We have this new Starfleet Academy show coming from the Discovery universe, and I feel very iffy about that.
Yeah,
and that's about it. I don't think I've heard of.
There's also a planned live action comedy that the I forget her name, but the actress who voices Beckett Mariner is part of the write-in staff for Tawny Newsome. She's part of the write-in staff for it.
I haven't heard of that one. Okay, a live action comedic Star Trek.
Yeah, it's set either on Risa or a planet like Risa or something like that.
Okay. Oh, probably more like okay, not a sitcom, but more comedy drama sort of thing. Okay.
I don't know the exact shading they're going to have, but
I would hope
it's more comedic.
Yeah, I'd hope it's more that and not sitcom-ish, like, a single camera studio audience thing. That would be weird. Okay. Any other thoughts on Lower Decks as a whole before we wrap up, Father?
Yeah, just a great series in the end. And, as somebody said earlier, it could have gone on for a few more seasons and I think still would have been a very good show. And even though I was probably in the skeptical camp when it was first announced, I was very glad to see that it turned out much better than I had expected.
Excellent. Jimmy, wrap up. Anything else?
Nope. I've already said my piece.
Okay, then let's move on to our feedback from listeners. This was on our last episode, Fisher Quest. David on YouTube writes, this episode reminded me of a story by, I think, Spider Robinson, where a dimension hopping corporation encounters a star travel corporation and the dimension hoppers blow up the gate as soon as they're back home because, quote, we'd lose so much business if people could go to other planets instead of just various Earths. And the FTL company breathes a sigh of relief because, quote, we'd lose so much business if people could go instantly to new Earths instead of flying forever to barely inhabitable rocks, end quote. So I guess you value what you don't have is the lesson there.
Yeah.
And then Truly Awesome New Mexico Catholic writes on YouTube, it's a good episode when Dom asks anything else and both the other panelists have something. So I think that's a good metric.
I hadn't been keeping track of that.
Zero World Craft on YouTube writes, I wrote a Galaxy Quest cartoon called Far Trek. Lower Decks was made instead. I still have my pilot and 3 seasons worth of episodes.
Well, that's cool.
Get it made.
All right.
That's what YouTube is for. Thank you, everyone, for your feedback. I would love to hear feedback from listeners and viewers, not just on this episode, but on the series. Give us your take on Lower Decks and what you think of it and, what you hope for from Star Trek in the future. We'd love to hear you. So now we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek, including Pat S., Al R., Julia, Father Matthew N., and Slow. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. This StarQuest show is also brought to you by Exodus 90 and the Exodus 90 app. Men, we are called to share the hope and joy of Jesus Christ. Our family, friends, and community desperately need us to imitate our Lord to be radically present and available. What if you intentionally live this Advent season differently, focused not on buying Christmas presents, but sharing the loving presence of Jesus Christ? We want to invite you to join us on the Exodus 90 app and break out of the religion of the world. Join the men of Exodus 90 and Monsignor James Shea, president of the University of Mary, who's our spiritual guide for Advent this year on the Exodus 90 app. Together, we will rediscover the hope that God lays out for us in the coming of his Son into the world. Go to exodus90.com/SQPN to learn more about Advent on the Exodus 90 app. That's exodus90.com/SQPN to join men from around the world this Advent starting December 1st. Be radically free in Jesus Christ this Advent. So that's it from us. We would love to know, like I said, what you thought of the new Next Generation and of Lower Decks. Let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, our Facebook page, facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Send us an email to trek@sqpn.com. Visit our Discord community at sqpn.com/Discord, or leave a comment on YouTube where you can watch the Secrets of Star Trek on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/StarQuestMedia. And be sure to like and hit the bell for notifications. We'll be back next week when we'll be discussing the Deep Space Nine episode, The Forsaken, and you'll get to see Father Corey instead of Father Jason because we've recorded a bunch of episodes before Lower Decks and Prodigy started with Father Corey. So
it's going to get timey-wimey for a few weeks.
It is going to get timey-wimey because we also have the Section 31 movie coming and another special discussion that the three of us will be doing, but I'll tell you about that some other time. Until then, Father Jason Tyler, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Star Trek.
Thanks, Dom.
And Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Thank you, and live long and prosper.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest. And remember, engage the core.